All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am so excited. Hey, Alan, good to see you. I'm very excited to begin Kabbalah Café with you this morning. We have a lot to talk about. So the title of today's class is The Nature of Miracles. And as we will see, it's actually one of the headers of the sections that we're going to read today. Today, it's all about the nature of a miracle. And I want to begin by just describing three different ways in which God deals with the universe. Number one, through nature. Number two, through miracles that kind of bend the laws of nature. And number three, through miracles that shatter the laws of nature. So let's go from easiest to understand. Well, let's go on the miracle side from most obvious to least obvious and then into nature, which itself should be pretty obvious as to what we're going to say about that. All right, so when it comes to miracles, you have certain miracles that absolutely shatter the boundaries, shatter the structure of nature. Let's talk about some biblical miracles. So I turn to you now. Share some biblical miracles that you are familiar with that you would put into that category of not just bending the laws of nature, but absolutely disregarding, breaking, shattering the laws of nature.
The parting of the Red Sea.
Splitting of the sea. Right? It's
natural occurrence. The winds came, they blew it. It was a natural occurrence.
Sponsored by the Discovery Channel. By the way,
but that was still a miracle, no matter what.
That the wind would have come at that time. Okay, so you said the splitting of the sea. Little pushback, but I would say splitting of the sea sounds like something that's not normal. Something that defies the very nature of water. What else? What are some other biblical miracles that would shatter the bonds? You got something?
Yeah.
Now you're going to push back.
Staff that turned into a serpent.
Staff that turned into a snake. Okay. Good. I mean, what? Your walking sticks don't just turn into snakes on the regular? All right. I guess you got the less expensive model. Okay, good. That might be another example. What are the other big and bold biblical miracles that we're familiar with?
It really isn't big, but the oil lasting for 7 days.
Okay, so that's you're talking about the Hanukkah miracle that will last for 8 days. Okay, some super-powered jet fuel oil. Good. What else? What are some other examples?
Not biblical, though.
You're talking because the world being created. Right?
Yes.
Like a miracle.
Yes. Okay, good. Yeah. It's kind of magical.
That was a biggie.
Yeah.
So striking the rock, Moses striking the rock, water coming out.
Striking the rock and water coming out. Another good example. Other biblical miracles. I feel like Alice Trebek.
Sarah having a baby.
Okay.
How old was she?
She was 90 years old.
Right. That's pretty miraculous.
That's pretty miraculous. Good. Yeah. That's not a normal. It's not a normal occurrence. What else? Even in an age? No, because he didn't live that old. What else? Some other miracles that. The plagues. Water turning into blood and frogs coming out and a mess and, all of the various plagues.
Let's dial it back. Noah in the ark.
Which part of that?
All of it.
The rain.
The flood?
Not so much the flood. The gathering, the animals, the 100 years it took them to build the ark.
Miracle or slow workers? I ask you to decide. Oh, yeah, manna falling from the sky. Good, food from heaven. That's a good example, right? That's not a daily occurrence. So we have in the Bible, we have in the Torah, we have in the biblical, and of course, when you look at the books of the prophets, you also have all these miracles that are going on, right? And so you look in Scripture and you see that you have indeed lots of miracles that are happening, and miracles that we would say are very comfortably defying the laws of nature, but disregarding them in a way it's like, oh, nature, get out of my way, I'm coming through, and that's what the miracle is. And then you have miracles that don't break the laws of nature, but they rather bend the laws of nature. What's an example of that? And by the way, some of you might think that some of the examples that were already said were ones that don't break the laws of nature, but and I know I'm being vague in the definition of what that means, but I want to first start with an example and then kind of back into or ease into the definition of what I mean by that. What to use a miracle, style of miracle that bends but doesn't break the laws of nature?
Water from the rock. You have water from the source. It's a
But the fact that that came out of that, okay, I hear that. What other type of miracle?
Burning bush.
Okay,
No, burning bush is,
you think that's breaking the laws?
that's breaking the law.
Okay, so we're going to have to define this. So we could look at it in different ways. Maybe one way to think about this is the difference between. Now, these are not biblical holidays. These are post 5 books of Moses. I mean, because they happen after that. So the holiday of Hanukkah and the holiday of Purim, which we just celebrated a few weeks ago. So, holiday of Hanukkah was associated, as was mentioned, with the miracle, or is associated with the miracle of the oil lasting for 8 days. And that is something that is not normal. I mean, it's like, you have all these memes that go around Hanukkah time of like, oh, imagine your cell phone battery is on 10% and it lasted the whole day. Miracle. Like, that doesn't happen. It's not possible. How can that even be? Right? So it's kind of like, a miracle that is obvious, and when it shows up, you say, oh, yeah, that was definitely a miracle. There's no hiding that. That's not working within the laws of nature. That is completely defined the laws of nature. But then you have miracles that work with the laws of nature. And the example of that might be the holiday that we just celebrated, the holiday of Purim. What happens? So, as we know, not to go through the whole Megillah, but as we know,
A good joke this morning.
that's what you like. You like Megillah jokes? All right, I hear that. Okay.
I like the fact that it was lost on everyone.
All right, good. All right, I'll see if I can drop like very subtle, low key jokes. So without getting into the whole, yeah, I already said that. So the Ganze Megillah, without getting into the whole Megillah. So the story goes that the king had a wife, and the wife is executed, and a new wife is chosen, and she's Jewish, and then a decree comes down against the Jewish people, and the Jewish queen reveals her identity and intervenes. Miracle or marriage? I ask you.
Timing.
Miracle, timing happened to be at the time of the severe decree against the Jewish people. The queen herself was Jewish. Imagine if in 1492, obviously this is not what happened, obviously, but imagine 1492, imagine if it was, because I think the queen was one that was driving it, Isabella in Spain. But imagine if King Ferdinand was the one who said, oh, let's get rid of the Jews. And at the last second, Queen Isabella said, oh, FYI, I am Jewish. Magic reveal. And then,
How about Columbus?
well, we always had a little line in 1492. Columbus was a Jew. There's a lot of, so here, the deal with Columbus is there's a lot of literature written about this. There's some letters that we have where he seems to sign them with like some Jewish references. So the question is, was he, wasn't he? What's the deal? Some say that's why he left in 1492, because kind of had to get away.
What about our 16th president?
Who was that?
Abraham Lincoln. So many people say he might have been Jewish.
I've never heard that.
I've
never heard that.
Abraham?
What?
I've heard that, but
I have never heard that. That Abraham Lincoln might have been Jewish? This is a hot take. All right, 1 second.
Did Christopher Columbus have a different name? Because Christopher is
Right. Yeah, but that would have been common, that people would have taken other names. Yeah, that wouldn't have been a thing, especially because back then, already at that time, even before Jews were expelled from Spain, things were getting a little bit hot for Jews. Like you couldn't really be, so overt.
We was thrown out of Barcelona in 1392.
Yeah. There was a lot of 100 years earlier. There were a lot of upheaval. Okay, but the point is, getting back to this, I don't even know how we got here. Here we go. Purim. I ask you. I'm gonna go back to my alliteration because I like it. Miracle or marriage? I need a hold on. I gotta come up with another. Gotta come up with another alliteration here. Was it? I can't. Was it a miracle or was it timing? I need another T, but I couldn't come up with one. Yes.
What if Esther didn't have the gumption
Yeah.
go through with this.
Good. Good. So you might say like this.
But like Mordecai said, if you don't do it, somebody else will. So.
Right. Some other queen is going to have to step in and marry this guy. Okay, listen. Here's the deal. Here's what we know. That, by all accounts, is a miracle. Right? The fact that Jews were saved at that time is a miracle. But it's a miracle that the miracle didn't bulldoze the laws of nature. No natural order of reality was shattered in the making of this miracle. No whatever was harmed in the making of this product, whatever. It's like no nature was shattered or broken in the making of this miracle. Why? Because when it comes to Hanukkah, first of all, the very military victory, even before the miracle of the oil in Hanukkah, was also a miracle. Like the military victory itself, and we say it in the prayers, that what happened, God delivered.
We're watching the miracle now.
The many into the hands of the few, and God delivered the mighty into the hands of the weak. Right? The Maccabees, they were a ragtag bunch of fighters. They weren't a lot, and they weren't really trained. And the Syrian Greek army was very large and very well trained. And for that miracle, for that military victory, even just to reclaim Jerusalem and the temple, that itself was a miracle. That didn't make sense militarily. And then you couple that with what happens next. They find a little bit of oil and it lasts for 8 days. The whole thing is like God is showing up and saying, I'm here. I'm here. You can't deny it. Whereas in the story of Purim, it's a little bit low key. Now, again, you and I would say 100% God's hand, a miracle. Yes, absolutely. But the way the miracle works is not by shattering nature. It's not by saying, nature, get out of the way. Here I am. It's by saying, let me work through the channels of nature. Let me work through natural diplomatic channels, and obviously guided by God, but in a way that doesn't actually bulldoze nature itself. By the way, that's one of the reasons why maybe the most famous and prominent custom of Purim is to dress up and wear a mask or wear a costume. It began with masks, it evolved into costumes. Why? To show that the miracle is a hidden miracle. God's miracle was hidden within nature, even though it was a miracle, but it worked within the natural bounds. The queen did something the king didn't like, so he got rid of her. That created an opening for a new queen. Esther happened to be very beautiful. Esther, a young Jewish girl, is chosen to be the queen. She keeps her identity on the down low. Things get kind of tense with the Jewish people as far as this decree. She then, at some point, reveals her identity to her husband and says that somebody's trying to kill me and my people. He says, who is it? She says, Haman. He says, well, let me get rid of him. And the decree. And they live happily ever after. So that's kind of the way it works. So, I mean, that's the story of a miracle that doesn't break nature, but works through nature. That's why also in the book of Esther, why we don't find any mention of God's name. There's no mention of God's name. It's
And
the
you know
only
who else
book.
you know who else is not mentioned in the Megillah? Moshe.
That is true.
Just like the Haggadah.
That is true. The point of God's name not being mentioned, and it's the only book of the books of the 24 holy books of Judaism, the 24 books of Scripture. It's the only book that does not have even one mention of God's name. And you read it, and it's a story about a crisis averted. Was it a miracle? So we know the answer. Of course, it's a miracle. God orchestrated the whole thing, but He did it in a way where there's plausible deniability. And then you have the third category, which doesn't necessarily need to be elaborated upon, which is nature itself. And that is just the natural order of things: sunrise, sunset, right? Planting, growing, just the way things work in the world, all of that, the natural occurrence,
All
gravity.
miraculous.
you could say all God, but we wouldn't necessarily call it a miracle, depending on how you define miracle. Now, in other classes, I might have said that that's also a miracle, but today I want to distinguish between the language and say like this. We believe it's all God. But when I'm using the language of miracle, I'm specifically referring to something that is defying the laws of nature. So nature wouldn't be a miracle because those are the laws. Anything that defies the laws of nature would be a miracle. And then again, within miracles, there's two categories. There are those that defy nature in an obvious way, and those that defy it in a very subtle, low-key way where you look back and say, wait a second, that shouldn't have happened. That's crazy that happened. That you have like all of these different steps that lined up, perfect timing, perfect alignment to produce that result, that's crazy. That's a miracle. But that's a miracle working in a way where, again, it's like where God has plausible deniability. There's the Talmud says there are miracles that the one who is the beneficiary of the miracle recognizes the miracle, and then there's some miracles, even Baal Hanes, even the one who's experiencing the miracle, doesn't recognize that it's a miracle. There's an example of this in the Torah, a wild example. The Jews are approaching the promised land after 40 years of wandering, and they pass by on a valley path, a valley road, and there's two mountain sides on either side, like mountain ranges, whatever it is, cliffs, mountains, hills, something. Valleys in the middle, right? They're along the valley, and they're the enemies of the Jews. Unbeknownst to them, were lying in wait in order to push boulders down or shoot arrows, whatever they did, however they fought back in the day 3,000 years ago, to, God forbid, like crush the Jews as they were walking on this path. But as the Torah alludes to, and this is in the book of Numbers, it says that before the Jews came across that path, the two mountains crushed together. Anybody familiar with this story?
Tell it. Go ahead.
It's straight up in the book of Numbers. The two mountains crush each other. And it says that one side of the mountain range had like caves, and the other one had like boulders that protruded. And the ones hiding in the caves were actually crushed by the boulders that kind of fit perfectly inside, and it crushed them. And then it opened back again.
That's a miracle.
No.
That's a miracle.
One second. This is straight up in the Torah. This is straight up Torah. And it says the Jews walked, and the only way they found out about it is because they saw the stream of water that was flowing from, that area, that there was, I don't want to get too gory, but blood and bodies and whatever it is of the enemy that were being washed down into the thing. That's an example of a miracle. That's a clear miracle. But it's possible that had they not noticed the river or whatever, they would have not even realized that a miracle was done for them. And I always think about that whenever we're up to that in the Torah reading, in the Torah portion. And by the way, after the class, if anybody is wondering, like, what are you talking, like, where is that? After the class, I'll either here or they're here, I'll show you the verse that talk about this. But I always think about how would we even know about a miracle that happens before we get to where we were going? Does that make sense? Would we even fathom or be aware of all of the miracles? Are we even aware of all of the miracles that are happening behind the scenes to allow us to get to our destinations, whether literally or figuratively? All the behind the scenes magic that's happening, that God is orchestrating miraculously so that our paths are safe and our paths and our steps are assured. And it's almost like, right, a surrender of like, God, I'm grateful for the things that I know about and the things that I don't know about. The things that are all happening in the background. I mean, how many of us are aware of how how the human body works and all of the different mechanics that have to happen. And again, that we can throw that into the category of nature. And my example is an example of, two mountain ranges crushing each other against each other and crushing an enemy, lying in wait. And I get that. But, who knows what might have been, in front of our path, again, either literally or figuratively, that God removes so that our steps are, our path is clear. And I don't always think about that, but I try to think about that on occasion, as a way to experience another element of gratitude. And it's another example of a miracle. There are miracles that we're aware of and miracles that we're not even aware of, because they're a little bit on the down low. What I'm trying to say is it could be that a miracle like Purim happens to us, and we might say, oh, that wasn't a miracle. That was just good luck. It was just good timing. Like the fact that I was looking to meet someone and I needed a connection somewhere, and then somebody pointed out, oh, I know a guy, and then I had whatever, like all of this stuff happened, and I ended up, connecting with who I need to connect with. That was just good networking, right? Or just good timing, or whatever it is. And it's meanwhile, so then that's the story of Purim. Purim is good networking. Esther got her way into the palace and averted a decree. That's it. It just all worked out. But we celebrate as a holiday and as a miracle. And the reason is because we recognize that when things just work out, they don't just work out, right? It's God. Now, it's not the same as watching a river of water transform into blood in front of your eyes. Plague number 1. It's not that. That's a miracle that that's obvious and clear. So there are ways that God is always showing up because it's all God. Okay. But in nature, God is very hidden. Meaning to say, it looks like nature and not God, which, we've talked about this so many times. Like, what is nature? Maybe that's another word for God. Fine. But many people look at it as nature, not God. So God hides kind of in nature. Then you have a miracle that kind of works with nature. So it's not the normal way of things to work. But again, there's some plausible deniability of, well, maybe it works like that in this case. But then you have miracles that are so clear and obvious that they just shatter all natural order, and it is clear that this is God showing up.
Was it a miracle when the Jews won the 48 war? I mean, it was they weren't soldiers. They weren't.
I'll tell
They
you.
defeated the Allies.
48 was a miracle, 67 was a miracle, 72 was a miracle. They're all miracles.
Yeah.
And now, what's
And
going to happen
now is
We're
pre-Mashiach.
waiting for the miracle. We're waiting for the
So 1 second. So I would agree with that. I would also say a few years ago we did a Zoom event. This was by COVID. Maybe some of you might remember this. It was a Saturday night. We had one of the guys that worked on the Iron Dome defense system in Israel speak. Remember this? Saturday night was Hanukkah, actually. And we had him, Ari Sacher, not sure how to pronounce his name. Maybe. He spoke about the Iron Dome, and he asked the question to all of us on Zoom. It was like 4:00 in the morning for him or something, and he was like ready to go. Anyway, cool of him to do that for us. And he asked the question, did anybody hear about, the news report that was going around about a missile that was fired at Israel, and a tremendously strong wind came and blew it into the Mediterranean. It was like a direct hit, and the wind blew it into the water. And I don't remember if people said they did hear it, they didn't hear about it. He said, but do you believe that miracle happened? And everyone said, yeah. So he said, that never happened. It's not a thing. But he said the fact that was fake news. But he said, that can't happen. But he said the fact that the Iron Dome is like 90 whatever % effective. When we made it, we were hoping for like a 50-50 situation. The fact that it's that effective is God working through nature. God doesn't always break nature by like taking a missile out of the sky and redirecting it. But God very often does work through the natural things that we have. So we create a technology, and based on our best estimation, it's only going to work, X percentage of times. But God works through nature and makes it happen. Anyway, that's just an example of that. Okay, so back to the story. If I were to ask you, hey Ramon, so where's the biggest demonstration of God? Would you say it's in nature, in the miracle that works through nature, or in the miracle that shatters nature? Where is the biggest demonstration or announcement of God? What would you say?
I see it when I see the flowers, and I see how every flower of its kind has the exact markings. And
What do you do in the winter?
well, you're still
I'm just
You don't have to answer him. It wasn't a serious question. All right. I hear you. So you're saying in the nature. Okay, good. Where else? What would be the intuitive answer?
When it's like, whoa.
Right. So the intuitive answer would be that when you can't come to any other conclusion other than, wow, that was God. Like something that's normal completely shifts to the extraordinary. That's God. It's like, okay, how many people have said, whether out loud or within their own minds and hearts, like if God were to show up and tell me X, Y, or Z, then I would definitely know, that it's all real, that it's all true. Right? If God were to speak to me or to show me a sign, God, show me a sign. You know what show me a sign means? Perform a miracle that breaks through the normative structure of nature. That's what show me a sign means. Show me a sign means, I know what this looks like, but show me that you're behind the curtain. Shatter something, right? Break through to show me that you're real. By the way, at Sinai and the events after Sinai, it was I don't mean like Sinai, recent Sinai, I mean like ancient Sinai, right? Revelation at Sinai, show that even when that happens, human nature kicks in, and within a short time we forget and we're less impressed about.
There was not a miracle.
Yeah, or even it was, but what have you done for me lately? You showed me a sign like that was so 2 weeks ago. You have another sign for me? If not, I've got a golden calf that I'm about to worship. Okay, so if we were to rank it in most, I would say most impactful, most powerful, we would go miracle that shatters nature, miracle that works within nature, and then of course nature. Now again, you're pointing out that within nature you're seeing the beauty and you're meditating on the fact that this is God, but that's already, I would say that's a meditation or contemplation that you are engaging in, as opposed to that which is the most obvious would be the miracle that just you can't deny because it's so open and obvious. And those are very rare, certainly in modern times. Okay. With that in mind, do I even have enough copies? I hope I do.
Some of us kept ours from last week.
Oh, so if you kept, yes, some of you kept them. Yeah. If you have from last week, it's good. That's good. It's fine.
But I did.
From last time.
It's all of this is restricted. It's in the Torah, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we have learned. We don't know beforehand what is going to happen, but they have found in the Torah that it's already. They have found evidence that this has happened. Was meant to happen.
We can share.
Whatever this is.
We have to.
You have an information.
Well, additional annotations. Impressive.
Yeah.
Got your name in the book.
It took some heavy lifting. Okay, I'm going to pull up this text. We're going to read it. All right, stay with me for a second. I'm just going to pull it up on my screen so I can read it here. Okay. So last week, if you recall, we read the first chapter of this text. And in the first chapter, we asked some questions. We asked some questions about the months of the year, which is the first month of the year, which is the seventh month of the year. We talked about two different beginnings, dual beginnings. We talked about how initially the month of Tishrei, which is the beginning of the Jewish calendar year, was the first month of the year. But then at the time of the Exodus, that switches, and the month of Nisan becomes the first month of the year. And we said that's month number 1, and month number 7 becomes Tishrei, and they kind of like flip-flop. Those are 6 months apart. So 1 becomes 7, 7 becomes 1, and that's what happens. And we asked the question, why was 1 initially 1, and why does that change to become 7? And if there's something special about the 7th month, why wasn't that the month of creation? Why is that the month of the Exodus? We asked all sorts of questions about, the order of the numbers of the months. Today, we're going to begin chapter 2. And in chapter 2, we continue in a somewhat similar theme, but not directly the same conversation. So let's begin with, one moment, let's begin with chapter number 2, page 36. We're about to ask some very interesting and fascinating questions. He says, the explanation of the matter is as follows. I handed out a sheet last week that had 7 questions from chapter 1. So there were a lot of questions that we asked. And so chapter 2 begins with, you have the sheet, all right, here's the explanation. It is written, and this is the opening of the 10 Commandments, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. So this needs to be understood. Now, if it's ironic that in answering questions, we immediately begin with another question, but that is the style of Kabbalistic texts. So the question now is going to be asked on the opening of the 10 Commandments. Why does God mention the Exodus from Egypt and not the creation of heaven and earth, which was a much greater miracle than the Exodus? Okay, so that's the question that's on the table. Why mention the Exodus and not creation? Let me explain the question. God is introducing himself at Sinai. Anochi, Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. Who did what? It's like God is stating his resume. Who took you out of the land of Egypt? The question on the table here, which is asked by many of the commentaries, biblical commentaries, is why doesn't God say, I am the Lord your God who created heaven and earth? In other words, what is the most impressive item on the resume? You would think the most impressive item on the resume is creation. And yet, what does God say? No, I took you out of Egypt. Let's continue. The miracle, and he's going to explain the question of why God should have mentioned creation and not Exodus. The miracles that occur with the Exodus from Egypt involve the manipulation of something from something. So, for example, the staff that turned into a snake and the water that turned to blood. And likewise, at the splitting of the sea, where the water stood erect like a wall. All these miracles were the manipulation of something from something. But the creation of heaven and earth is a creation of something from nothing. It would therefore seem that God should have said, I am the Lord who created heaven and earth. This is a very strong question. And it actually goes counter to everything we've said up until now. And that's why I wanted to use that introduction to then kind of provide a little contrast. So here we go. What happens when a miracle occurs? So let's use the examples that he cites over here. So we had water. Let's start with the staff turning into a snake. Someone mentioned that earlier as a miracle. You did. A staff turns into a snake. So you have a staff, you have a stick, a rod, whatever, and it turns into a snake. Wow! That's an obvious miracle, a miracle that defies the laws of nature. Great. However, if you look at the architecture of the miracle, though, what's happening is that one thing is turning into another thing. So it's not that you have something out of nothing. It's something from something. Now in Hebrew, I'm going to share with you the Hebrew phrase. Some of you may be familiar with this. We would call this yesh miyesh. Yesh means something, meyesh from something. So something from something. Whereas creation was yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. Something from nothing is a greater trick, is a greater novelty than something from something. So to take one thing and to modify it into something else, less impressive than taking nothing and creating something from that nothing. Does that make sense? Give you an example. You walk into a room and there's nothing there. To make something from nothing, that's remarkable. To take one entity and create another entity, to take a cell and create lab-grown meat or whatever it is, okay, that's amazing, but that's not the same as starting from nothing and creating something out of nothing. Make sense?
Yeah, they said the wizards, well, they did in the Torah. The Pharaoh's wizards created their own snakes.
They could replicate.
They replicated.
Because they had something to deal with,
Right.
something to start with. But anytime you're starting with nothing, to create something from nothing
That's
is
impressive.
truly remarkable. So again, if God is seeking to impress in his resume, do you know who I am? I'm the one who, fill in the blank. He says, I'm the one who took you out of Egypt, meaning with all the miracles. The question on the table here is that really that impressive? Sorry, that's impressive, but is it the most impressive thing you've done,
But
God?
it was the most relatable at the
Oh,
time.
good. We're going to get into that in a second. Hold that thought.
I'll hold it.
So the question is it the most remarkable thing that God has done? One could argue, not at all. Creating this universe out of nothingness is way more remarkable than the miracles that are something from something. Now, the commentaries, as Jeff points out, take a look. You all have it there. Take a look at footnote number 24. Okay, footnote 24. The Rebbe is not the first to ask this question. Early biblical commentators address the issue and offer a number of solutions. Kuzari, it's a famous book of philosophy written by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. Kuzari maintains that God speaks of the Exodus since it was something the Israelites had seen with their own eyes and would therefore mean more to them. I think that's what you were suggesting, right? Meaning, God says to this group of people that had just been slaves in Egypt, I'm the one who just did that. Meaning, God is not necessarily pulling out from his resume the most amazing thing he's ever done, but rather either the most recent or the most relatable thing that he did for this individual group of people. That's an easy answer. We're going to go obviously more Kabbalistically than philosophically in this text. Another answer that's a classic answer given, again, look in the footnote, bottom line of that left column of the footnote. Ibn Ezra, another biblical commentary, argues that God refers to his role in the Exodus not to impress the Israelites with his power, but to establish grounds for his imposing special responsibilities upon them, since he had afforded them special treatment in freeing them from Egyptian slavery. I may have written that footnote, but I'll explain what that's saying. Basically,
your name on the book, right?
Also,
Okay. Just checking.
God was basically about to give them a list of do's and don'ts. And God is saying, before I give you the list of do's and don'ts, let me tell you why you should listen to me. Because if not for me, you would still be slaves in Egypt. The very fact that you're free is due to me. Now you're listening? Okay, good.
Due to me or Deuteronomy?
Good. Right? So your very freedom, your ability to have your own wherewithal, your own life is due to me. Therefore, I reserve the right to guide your life. Yeah.
That makes sense to me because I was thinking about how, even in Egypt, the Pharaoh's maidservants were God-fearing. It's not as if people in Egypt didn't already have a conception of, oh, there's a creator God out there, there's some type of deity that exists. If God were to appear and just be like, oh yeah, I'm him, it's almost like it's not as personal. They're like, oh, yeah, we've heard it before. But if you come and you say, well, yeah, all these things that you just went through, the miracle, all that was me. Like, now you should follow me. In Exodus, God is very personal.
Yeah.
It's like it's almost as if they're standing right there with him the whole time.
Right.
So that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. So on both levels, number one, even on a disconnected level, as it were, for God to give them something powerful that they could relate to. That's the first answer. And the second level is they're entering a relationship. And God is saying the reason why you should be invested in this relationship is because I've invested in you. Right? I've done this for you. Now I'd like you to do this for me. So it's kind of like, not that it's only transactional, but there's this type of reciprocity that's involved also on some level in this relationship. And I know that makes it sound like less intimate than what you're sharing, but I'm saying along those lines, there's a give and a take in the relationship. But God is saying, this is what I've done. Now here's.
And a lot of the text in the Tanakh describe it as a husband-wife relationship.
Correct.
So it's like that. You do things for your partner.
Right. They do things for you. Exactly. So it's a back and a forth. And so these are some very elegant and very, I think, clear answers to this question. Again, most of the biblical commentaries have asked this question. When you come to the Ten Commandments, and the first commandment says, I am the Lord your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt. Why that? And the simple answers are, well, because that's what the people had just experienced, and that also establishes the framework for this type of relationship. However, Kabbalah has something to say about it as well. The Kabbalistic question is not simply from the perspective of which one will be more impactful or which one is more relevant to the conversation at hand, but it's more to the objective question of, what was the greater feat, as it were? Is it creation, or is it the miracles that happen in the context of the Exodus? And the argument here is that, again, leaving those answers aside, getting back to the way he articulates the question that he's articulating specifically is something from something is less remarkable than something from nothing. For God to create the universe out of nothingness, there wasn't anything physical or anything of existence before creation. And that creation then comes into being miraculously. When God makes it, that is way bigger a miracle than the miracle of taking a staff and turning it into a snake, or taking water, a Nile River, and turning it into blood, or taking water that's fluid and making it solid. All of that is something from something. However, he then pushes back on the question. Okay, the nature of a miracle. And here we go. Let's get a little bit deeper into this. You have to halt cup a little bit. You have to kind of stay focused here. The truth is that when we apply the expression something from something to the miracles of the Exodus, we mean that the something, the original something, turned into another something, one with a different nature. And what he's trying to express in this is almost a question. He says, one second, he's questioning his own question. I just asked, isn't something from nothing greater than something from something? Yes. But the something from something of these miracles is really something from nothing. Why? Because nothing like the previous entity existed before. Let me share with you a quick introduction about this. If I take a piece of wood and I turn it into a staff, that's something from something. If I take a piece of wood and turn it into a wooden chair or a table, again, something from something. So we would say that's not a miracle. That's not that remarkable. It's something from something. But if I take a staff and turn it into a snake, is that really something from something? Couldn't you argue that the snake is from nothing? Because the staff didn't produce the snake? Does that make sense? What I just said? Isn't that the equivalent?
But what happened to the staff?
I'm with you. So then you turn something into nothing and nothing into something. But one could argue that the real definition of something from something that's less remarkable than something from nothing is when you take, let's say, a stem cell and you make lab-grown beef, because that naturally emerges. Cells produce, I don't even know the science, but whatever. Cells produce whatever they produce. But to take a staff and turn it into a snake, isn't that God basically creating something from nothing? Because there was no snake there before. It's not like God took a snake egg and turned it into a snake, or God took a snake embryo. That's not what happened. God took a staff and turned it into a snake. Isn't that essentially the same as something from nothing? There was nothing like that before. This was a brand new thing conjured up from something completely different. So is it really something from something? Let's read this inside. This is certainly so in the case, which means he's pushing back on his pushback. He's pushing back on his question. His question was, why did God mention Exodus, the miracles of the Exodus? He should have said creation, because that's something from nothing. He says, well, actually, maybe Exodus miracles were also something from nothing, really, even though they were from something, but it's really nothing. Let's go. This is certainly so in the case of the staff that turned into a snake. In this case, the staff did not just turn into a different entity. It turned into a completely different category of being. Now, that itself will require just a quick introduction, something that you might already know. We've talked about many times how in Judaism, we talk about 4 categories of life: inanimate, vegetation, animal, and human. Well, think about it. What was the staff? Well, it depends. There's 2 opinions. There's 2 opinions on the staff. It's in the footnotes. 2 opinions. The staff either was, what was Moses' staff made out of?
Wood.
Not so fast. One, there's two different midrashic traditions. One tradition says it was made out of sapphire, and one says it was made out of wood. So if it was made out of sapphire, then you're going from inanimate stone into a snake, which is an animal, a living creature. If you say it was made out of wood, you're going from vegetation to animal. Either way, it's not a natural evolution to go from one classification of life to a completely different classification of life. So isn't it essentially something from nothing? That's his question. He articulates it here. At first, it was either mineral or vegetable, depending, next page, please, 38, depending on the 2 opinions regarding the staff, whether it was made of stone, meaning sapphire, or wood. And when it turned into a snake, it entered an entirely different category, that of an animal, and acquired a different nature, that of its new category, meaning it didn't just become a snake and remain with the nature of a stone. No, it became a snake and took on the nature of a snake. The whole 9 yards. It slithered, it had a tongue that came, whatever it was, whatever the snake did, whatever snakes usually do, this snake did. And that means that where did this snake come from? The staff? How could it come from the staff? That doesn't make any sense. Pieces of stone don't evolve into snakes. Pieces of wood don't evolve into snakes.
When God is involved, they do.
But that's his question. Does it evolve, or does it mean that he got rid of the staff and produced the snake? In which case, isn't that the same as something from nothing? Isn't that essentially what God did at the time of creation, or when he created snakes for the very first time? His question is, let's break this down. When God performs the miracle of the staff turning into a snake, is it an evolution or is it a revolution? Is it yesh miyesh or yesh mi'ayin? Is it something from something or something from nothing? It seems to be he's arguing now it's kind of something from nothing, because there was no snake before.
I would argue back.
And say?
Because God did not say that he took the staff and made it disappear and made a snake appear.
Okay.
God in the Torah said he turned that staff into a snake.
Yeah, but you can't turn a staff into a snake.
God, if you're God, you can.
But isn't that the same as turning nothing into a snake?
No.
The staff doesn't help
You
you.
started with something. That was your argument to begin with.
But you're not starting with, but you're not starting with anything.
You're not starting with a snake, but you're starting with a stick.
Okay, so that's where we're at. Good. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. So that's where we're at right now in the conversation. So again, not to lose the
I'm
track.
probably wrong, by the way. So let's.
No, you're not.
The example of like walking to a room with nothing in it.
Yeah.
You can't make anything. But then let's say you walked into a room and there's a cup. Well, how can you make a cup into what? Let's say a light bulb.
Right. So the argument is the staff is just
They're
as
both inanimate, by the way.
no. The point is
Still,
no, but the point is that the staff is as useful as nothingness, vis-a-vis a snake. That's his question. I understand what your point is, but at the end of the day, it's not nothing, it's something. That's your point. But the argument that he's asking, his question right now is, but that something is as useful as nothing, because how can a staff become a snake? Okay, let's keep on going, because he gets further into this.
But you can't give it the same zechus as creating something from nothing. But God created night and day.
It's not my question. It's the Rebbe's question. He's asking the question.
And he's not around to answer.
The above is he thought of what you said, and we'll see how he answers the question also. The above is true. Second paragraph in 38. Even in the case of the water that turned to blood. Okay, again, the above is true. Even in the case of the water that turned to blood. Although the transformation took place within the same category of being, what does that mean? Water and blood are both inanimate. So it's not like staff, snake, whatever that jump was. So they're both inanimate objects. Nevertheless, water and blood are two opposite types of beings with opposite natures. Now, you might be wondering, how are they opposites? He explains. Water symbolizes chesed, kindness, while blood symbolizes gevura, severity. They are also opposite in function. Let's explain what that means for a quick second. Water, he says, is chesed. Water is the ultimate symbol of chesed. We know that chesed, kindness, is that which helps those that are, in a difficult spot or in a low spot. Water also flows always to the lowest spot. So just like water flows downward, kindness seeks to help those that need to be uplifted. That is the nature of kindness. Blood symbolizes gevura. What is gevura? Gevura here is translated as severity. Gevura is strength also. Gevura is also fiery passion. Like blood. Blood is like heat, passion, right? When someone gets angry, we say their blood boils. It doesn't actually literally boil. I don't think the temperature of the blood changes. I don't think that's a thing. I don't think it is. What is it?
Yeah, in Spanish we also can say me hierve la sangre, my blood.
Yeah. So I don't think biologically that the blood actually temperature changes.
Whereas the water does boil.
Can boil if you apply some fire to it. The point is that blood symbolizes heat, symbolizes gevura, symbolizes passion, and that type of fire energy. Whereas water, chesed, purity, kindness, etc. Now, they're also opposite in function. Water cools and blood heats, so they're opposite in function. And so what he's arguing is that when the Nile River, which by all accounts is a cold water river, when the Nile River is transformed to blood, is that really something from something? His argument is, isn't that something from nothing? Now you can say, well, they're both liquids. Sure, but they have completely different natures. And because they have completely different natures, where is the blood coming from? The water? How can the blood come from the water? It's a completely new thing. So therefore, although you had water before, but the blood is like a new creation. So isn't it the same as a new creation? Let's continue. And it is true even in the case of the splitting of the sea. By the way, he gave 3 examples in his question, and he's challenging all 3 examples. He gave 3 examples in the first section of this chapter, like on the last page, where he said creation is much more astonishing than the miracles of the Exodus, because creation is something from nothing, whereas the miracles were something from something. And he cited 3 examples: staff, snake, water, blood, and then the water splitting, standing like a wall, liquid turning into solid. And now he's questioning all that.
This all sounds miraculous.
Yes. Yes, it is. And it is true even in the case of the splitting of the sea, where the water stood like a wall. Although the substance of the water did not change, meaning it remained water, as the water merely stood like a wall. So, all that happened by the splitting of the sea was that the water solidified, as it were. It didn't change substance. It didn't become not water. Unlike the water that turned to blood, where the actual substance of the water changed and its substance became blood. But nonetheless, its nature changed. The nature of the water changed. The nature of the water was literally transformed to an opposite nature, meaning the fluidity of the water was transformed into a solid nature. So it's very important to recognize that when we talk about the splitting of the sea, it's not that the water became bricks. That's different. If we would have said, oh, you know what happened? Water turned into stone. Well, then that would be like water turning to blood. No, the water remained water. But instead of the water flowing, we know that things have different states. I guess maybe you call it ice. It doesn't say that it became ice, but I guess that's the closest, example that we could say, right? Different things take different forms. You have solid, liquid, and then a gas, right? So if you evaporate water, it's a gas. If the water is in its normative state, I guess we could say it's water. If it's frozen, then it becomes a solid. This water became a solid. It didn't not become water anymore, but the water became a solid. Again, I've never seen a commentator that says it got so cold that it froze in place. Although that could explain it on some level, at least, physically. But the point of this is that it's not that it actually, no, sorry. His point is that it didn't freeze. In that moment for that sea, the nature of the water changed from a liquid to a solid. Let's continue. And this is going to get into another text that we're going to have to read next week in order to fully understand it. These changes involve not only the substance of these beings, which change from one substance to another and from one nature to another. The change involved the divine energy that creates the being. As in the saying, he who tells oil to burn will tell vinegar to burn. Okay, and this is going to set us up for next week. There's a story in the Talmud with Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa. And he was a man who the Talmud says he knew miracles. He was a guy that miracles happened to and around all the time. One Friday evening, his daughter comes to him in tears. And she says, I made a big mistake. I was lighting the Shabbat candles. Now, this is before like candles. They had, oil lamps. And she said, by accident, I put vinegar instead of oil. And I lit it. So Rabbi Hanina ben Dosa says to her, don't worry. The same God that told oil to burn will tell vinegar to burn also. That's what he says to her. And it burned the entire Shabbat. To the point that they used it for the Havdalah candle ceremony to close out Shabbat. Use a candle, it was still burning 24, 25 hours later. He who tells, meaning the same God who told oil to burn, will also tell vinegar to burn. What does that mean? It means what makes oil burn and vinegar not burn? Well, it's nature. Who made the nature? God makes the nature. So when vinegar becomes as combustible as oil, you know what's really happening? God is giving it a different energy. Well, if that's the case, aren't we actually saying, and likewise, when water becomes a solid out of nowhere, that means that God's giving it a different nature. Isn't that the equivalent of God creating something new? And so that's his question right now. His question is, the initial premise was there's a difference between creation and a miracle. And the follow-up to that is, well, is there really a difference? Because in all the miracles of the Exodus, whether it's the staff turning into a snake, Moses' staff, when he throws it down before Pharaoh, kind of before the plagues happened, when he was trying to show that he was legit. So Pharaoh says, why should I believe you? Who said you're even speaking on behalf of God? So Moses says, watch this. He throws down a staff and it turns into a snake. Or whether it's the plague number 1 with the Nile River, turns into blood, or whether it's after the Exodus and the Egyptians chase the Jewish people and they're pinned against the sea and the sea splits and the water stands like a wall. In all of these cases, asks the text, asks the previous Rebbe, the question is the same. In all of these cases, the question is it really something from something? Or is it something from nothing? Did that snake exist previously in the form of a stick? I don't think so. So it's a brand new snake that's being created. Did that blood exist in the Nile River? No. So it's a brand new creation of blood. Did the nature of water to be a solid exist within the water that was a liquid? The answer is no. Which means that God is creating it from new. Isn't that the same? Isn't a miracle essentially God creating a brand new thing that wasn't here previously? If that's the case, then a miracle is the same astonishing reality as creation. Now you and I might say, great. Now what? Okay, good point. They're the same. He wants to get back to his question, which is, why did God introduce himself as the one who took us out of Egypt with the miracles and not the one who created heaven and earth? So we want to still put creation as a greater accomplishment. But he's questioning that. We're going to get to a deeper level of understanding. We will get to the answer to this question. So we're going to get to a deeper place, but not today. Next week, what we're going to do is we're going to read a little bit from the second section of the book of Tanya called Shar Hayichud Ve'emunah, the gate of divine unity and faith. And we're going to read about really the matrix of existence, the divine letters that are the code of creation. And we'll see how everything that exists is coded by the original 10 utterances from the book of Genesis that God said and uttered to create the reality. How everything that's created is some sort of combination of these letters. We'll read from the original text from the second part of Tanya, and then we're going to jump back in and apply it to what we just studied today. All right, I hope that makes sense. So in summation and in conclusion, what do we cover today? We talked about miracles. We spoke about 3 different ways that God shows up: in nature, in miracles that work with nature, and in miracles that break nature. And we said that on the surface, it would seem that the miracles that break nature are the highest level. Then we question that by reading the text where he says that no, the creation of nature itself seems to be the greatest of all because it was something from nothing as opposed to a miracle, which is something from something. But then he questions that question by asking, well, isn't a miracle something from something also essentially something from nothing? Leaves us with a lot of somethings and a lot of nothings, but hopefully a lot of clarity as to these topics. One thing that I will share that I will circle back to is the idea, very important idea, that in all of our lives there are miracles that are happening constantly. Not only is the very nature a miracle, it's that God created from nothing, but the unknown miracles in our lives. Like I said before about the river Arnon and the enemy, the Ammonites that were lying in wait. It's important to have and practice gratitude, not only for the stuff that we see, but for the stuff that we don't see. The fact that we get to our journeys successfully, the fact that even on a literal level, we get into our car and we get to our destination and it all works out. How do we know what had to happen behind the scenes in order for that all to happen? The fact that our health, that we go about our day, as we are, the fact that, the fact that things go smoothly without any fanfare, that itself is the product of intense divine miracles and divine blessings. And so this is a great way to live with gratitude and to live every day with a powerful sense of God's presence and God's hand in our literal lives every moment of every day. And so let this carry us this week until next week when we get to more mind-bending Kabbalah. And next week is going to be mind-bending as we get into the letters of creation or the divine code of creation. That's all next week. All right. Good to see you. Thank you all for coming. Questions, comments?
There's a
Yes.
book for children called Something from Nothing. I
Yes.
don't know about the code and the making
The fabric, yeah.
I was gonna say, it's not.
I love that. But once I love that book. It's a very cute book.
I used to read it a lot. And I
Yeah,
have it
yeah,
all,
yeah. But it's not really from nothing. It's from something. Yeah. It gets smaller and smaller.
Until he loses the button at the end.
He loses the bun at the end. Yeah. What are you gonna do? It's very cute. It's a great book. Ramon, what were you saying?
No, I was gonna say it's not actually as if it was from nothing. Like when we say nothing, things emanated from God themselves, Kabbalistically. So like in a way, it actually does make sense. Like it is more impressive for like a stab turn to a snake than like we're talking about creation coming from everything. Like when we talk about nature, like the
Right.
nature of everything is inherent in unsolved, and that's where it emanated from. So that's almost less impressive in the way you think about it than like a stab turned into a snake. It's like inherently the material of creation has all states within it.
Yeah.
So that's kind
Oh, so you're saying so it has in it, even in the staff, there's some element. Okay, I think that's what Jeff was kind of saying.
Yeah, because it's like
You're saying it's still substantive.
In a way, it's all in a way they're the same. In a way, they're all something from something. In a way, like in a way, it's
I hear what you're saying. You're saying that even though it was no snake at all, it still was something. You're still starting with some.
a source code that you like. You're saying
He's going to go with a different answer at the end, ultimately.
Right.
But it's a long. We'll see. We'll get to it next week.
I like that.
What do we got? Thank you. It's good to see you. All right, let me sign off over here. Yaakov, Jacqueline, Mariana. Hey, Mariana. Good to see you. All right, everybody. Have a great week. Shavua Tov. See you all. Give regards to